Hi, this is Josh Reed, Sports Director at WIVB Channel 4 in Buffalo, and you are listening to the Tim Graham and Friends podcast.
What are you doing?
Tim's been bothering me to do this thing for his podcast. Sorry. I gotta stop this, I guess.
CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
Welcome to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. Later on in this episode, we're going to be joined by Florina Altshiler. She is a longtime friend of the show, and she comes on to discuss legal issues, most notably when they involve sexual assaults. That is her specialty. She's the former prosecutor for high-level sex crimes for the state of Alaska. She now works in Western New York as a defense attorney, and she's going to join us to talk about Gable Steveson's past. And a lot of people have mentioned that as a red flag. Gable Steveson, of course, the Olympic wrestler who the Bills signed to play defensive tackle this past week, even though he has never played a down of football in his life. But of course, everybody knows the Sean McDermott story and his involvement in wrestling, two-time high school national champion. He has stayed involved in terms of his passion for collegiate wrestling, particularly with Penn State, Terry Pagula's alma mater. He's brings in wrestlers to speak all the time. He's speaking with wrestlers all the time, and he's been involved in that community. So I think that if anybody would be able to know how a wrestler's skill set would translate to football, it would be Sean McDermott. So Gable Steveson, after a short tenure with WWE, is a career free agent and is going to give the NFL a try. We're going to save his background for Florina, and we're going to talk about that. There was a loophole in which he was not tried for a case in which he and a teammate at Minnesota were arrested, and we're going to get into that. Well, how significant it is? Should it be significant? Should it matter? Excuse me. I muted for that sneeze. I guess I could have taken my face off, so everybody got to watch me sneeze there. That's fun. But Jonah, before we get into all of that, Florina's going to join us later. You know, we didn't get into the whole discussion regarding, and it's a classic off-season discussion that carried the day on sports talk radio, on the different TV shows, the debate of whether you could find, what was the exact one? Something, was it 10 or 10 or how many, what was it? Something regarding NFL. Could you field an NFL team based off NBA players, or what was it? Do you know what the actual?
I don't know what you're referencing to. I know Josh Allen was asked about it, and he had his delusional comments about being a off the bench 3-and-D contributor on an NBA team, but I don't know what sports talk radio discussion led to that.
I think it was something like, could you find 10 NBA players out of the NFL, or 10 NFL players out of the NBA, something like that. And anyway, what the Bills have done here in trying to find football players who didn't really play football has been intriguing. And Gable Steveson is the latest. They also have on their roster Travis Clayton, who they drafted. He's a rugby player who they're trying to turn into an offensive tackle under the international program. And they brought into rookie camp for a tryout linebacker Zed Williams. He's a lacrosse player. And of course, he didn't make the team, but the Bills are trying everything seemingly to find NFL talent. And to me, this kind of answers the question, doesn't it? I have a better answer that I'll save for a little bit later, and you know who my answer is. But doesn't this kind of prove the point that maybe it's easier for an NBA player to just cross over and play in the NFL than vice versa?
Well, yeah, I think there's a few things at play. One, it's pure math and the numbers. There's a lot more positions on a football field and roster spots on an NFL team, and especially this time of year with the offseason rosters extending to 90 players, there's just more opportunities and avenues to try to take somebody who's maybe athletic enough to play professional football and teach them the skills and the football IQ necessary to play the game. And it's maybe a sport that lends itself better to you're a good enough athlete, we'll show you how to play the game, and you'll learn on the fly, where I think other sports, basketball, especially baseball, and really a lot of sports that you can name, if you don't grow up and develop that specific skill set at 22, 23, 24 years old, you really can't learn how to play the game. Now, many NFL players probably played high school basketball and are probably the best player in every pickup game that they get into. And if you or I were to be on the court with them, they would probably dominate us like and appear like NBA players against regular Joes. But the other factor is the height. I mean, Josh Allen is he still the tallest quarterback in the NFL? At one point he was at 6'5". That's relatively small for an NBA player. He thinks he can go in there and be a defensive player. I don't know if there's really anybody he can guard, because at 6'5", he's not guarding any forwards, any centers. Even a lot of the wings are taller with longer arms and faster and stronger than he is. He'd have to guard point guards and other guards, and I don't think he's nearly fast enough, even though he's a very fast football player, to do that. And I think Josh Allen said that with a bit of a tongue in cheek, that he would come off the bench and shoot some threes and defend. But I got a real chuckle by him thinking he can't guard anybody in the NBA. I don't think.
No, not at all. Yeah, 3-and-D, maybe the three. I mean, I would think of Josh Allen's best ability would be as like a rebounder to go in and bang, but not at 6'4" or 6'5".
He'd have to be a point guard.
He'd have to be a hustle player based on his makeup, I think, and his mentality, but he wouldn't have the hustle skill set.
He'd have to go in there and play quarterback. He'd have to use all of the traits and athletic abilities and mental know-how that's made him an all-pro quarterback and bring that to the basketball floor and do that as a point guard and shoot the ball and dribble and pass and distribute and use his athleticism. And at 6'5", then he's a good size for a point guard. He's not big enough to play like Luka Doncic. But kind of him projecting himself as this defensive player, hustle guy. I mean, all the rebounds would be snatched before he even stuck his arms up. I mean, everybody on the floor is much taller than he is. I don't know how high he jumps, but I'm sure he's not out rebounding some of the big 6'9", 6'10" guys that are in the NBA. Even as the NBA has gotten smaller in a lot of ways, and there aren't as many 7-footers and 6'11" power forwards on the floor these days. That's the biggest thing you notice about even Division I college basketball, but especially professional basketball, is just how big all of these guys are. Even the smaller players are tall with very long arms. And that's why I think there's a little bit of a translate. I haven't quite seen it. Even there's a lot of college basketball players that have turned into tight ends in the NFL. What we haven't yet seen is the 6'10" guy that comes in to be a wide receiver. And just imagine how uncoverable that type of player would be if they can develop the skill set, because there are no 6'8" safeties and 6'8" cornerbacks to try to match up with somebody, or a 7'5" Victor Wembanyama out there as a tight end. I mean, what are you gonna do about that?
Yeah, that's something that I tried to tackle many years ago, back when I was at ESPN. I was assigned to do a story, a what if story about LeBron James. back in May of 2009. I have the story up here in front of me, in which they asked me to take a honest analysis, or to take a look at what if, because I think back then, even he was talking about retiring. LeBron James has been talking, he accomplished a lot of things. And back in 2009, every offseason, there's the what if, maybe I've had enough, maybe I need a new challenge type stuff. And so ESPN asked me to write that story, and I interviewed a lot of people for it, including Bill Parcells. I interviewed Mark Murphy, who is in the Packers Hall of Fame, not Mark Murphy, who's the president of the Packers, the Clarence High School graduate, but the other Mark Murphy, who played for Washington and Green Bay throughout the course of his career. And he was a coach at St. Vincent St. Mary when LeBron James was an all-state receiver there. So imagine, Mark Murphy, by the way, says there's a quote from him. "I've been around a lot of great receivers. I tell people that I rate my top receivers, coaching, playing, or watching." Keep in mind, he guarded these people as James Lofton, Jerry Rice, Steve Largent, and LeBron James. And so 6'8", 250 pounds. How do you guard him? How do you guard him in the red zone? It doesn't matter if he runs a 4.8 40, and I'm sure LeBron James can run probably better than that, but it would be unstoppable. Now, of course, that's LeBron James, and we have all kinds of examples of guys who've played basketball and shifted over to play football, even going as far back as Otto Graham with the Cleveland Browns. So he played for the Rochester Royals. Of course, that was a different time. But we have Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates and Connor Barwin and all kinds of dudes that have played at the college level. You even have Keon Coleman right now on the Bills roster. He played at Michigan State for Tom Izzo before transferring to Florida State to play football only. But my trump card in this discussion for the last couple of weeks that I've had it is Chris Manhertz. Now, here's a guy who was a very good Metro Atlantic Conference player, not a superstar by any stretch, not an All-American. We're not talking about all-world skills and size like LeBron James and Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates. Antonio Gates was even a borderline college player at Kent State. So here you have a guy at Canisius College, Metro Atlantic, very good player, all that stuff. I'm not even sure what awards he got. I'm sure he was all MAC, right? But still, on nobody's radar to play even a second of NBA basketball. Might have had a fine career overseas, but never put on pads in his life, similar to Gable Steveson. And Jim Barron, the coach of Canisius at the time, phones the Bills to talk to Russ Brandon and says, "I think I have a project here. I think this guy could be a good NFL player." He works with the coaches at St. Francis. They teach him how to put his pads on and go after tackle dummies and blocking dummies and work on his technique. And he is about to enter his 9th NFL season. Chris Manhertz never played a down, out of Canisius College, which doesn't even have a football program, by the way, is with the New York Giants. He has caught passes from Drew Brees and Cam Newton, and he doesn't. And here's the thing that's always remarkable. This is kind of an aside. When you think of tight ends making the transition, I've named the names. You think of catching the pass. The big body, red zone target, soft hands, all that stuff. He does the dirty work. He does not catch the ball. He blocks. He is a blocker. And the reason he's stuck around in the NFL is he is a really good blocker at tight end. He has 26 career catches. 26. He's only been targeted 40 times. He has a couple touchdowns, but this guy's not on the field on passing situations. He's on the field in obvious run situations. Again, he's a grunt, but he's about to play his 9th NFL season if he can make the roster with the New York Giants, and there's an opening. Darren Waller doesn't look like he's too engaged with being a NFL player anymore. But anyway, that's my answer to that question of which is the athlete that could make the transition more. Is it the NBA player to the NFL or vice versa?
Who maybe we should get on to ask about this is Greg Paulus. who played both sports very well in high school, then went after 4 years at Duke, played quarterback at Syracuse. And I think in a different frame, Charlie Ward did something similar, won a Heisman Trophy playing at Florida State, and then had an NBA career. But
that's one of the examples that people bring up. Charlie Ward couldn't hack it, but he was a very good basketball player. Well, Charlie Ward, like a lot of Heisman Trophy winners, he was a weird size for a quarterback. It's the same, you can gadget your way to a Heisman Trophy at quarterback and still not have the NFL ability. And the list is pretty long of examples for that, including Tim Tebow.
Yeah, and I think the fact that that happens so infrequently, even with college players going from the other way, going from football to basketball, I think those are the exceptions that maybe prove the rule on how difficult it is to acquire that skill set and be tall enough and have the body to make it work. And I think that there's a big obvious difference between at the high school level, athleticism can trump all. And sometimes these professional athletes are just so good that they're the best player in whatever sport they pick up. In college, there's less of that, but maybe there's an ability to just be the super athlete that takes over the game no matter what game you're playing. At the professional level, it's too nuanced, and you not only have to be a great athlete, but you have to be a great player and an experienced player and needing all those reps. And for somebody that didn't play both of those sports, Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson, and I don't know if there's anybody else like them, but those two being the two in the modern era that have done that are two of the most gifted athletes that have ever played either
Brian
one of their
Jordan.
sports. Correct. But they're
Ricky
also
Williams. I mean, he was a minor league baseball player. Russell Wilson.
Right. But my point is, they're also, and I think this applies to all the people that you named, people that continued playing college baseball and played both sports through their college years. And coming back to Gable Steveson, I think he's going to have a very difficult time making this team and making it in the NFL, having not played football recently, and everything that he needs to learn and develop, the muscle memory and the abilities to do things with his body. Even though great high school wrestlers are often excellent high school football players and there is some skill transfer there, had he been somebody that played some college football or had been training in a football environment instead of trying to be a professional wrestler, which is more acting than athletic, which is as much acting as it is an athletic pursuit, maybe that could be more likely. But just the little techniques and everything that he's going to have to learn in a truncated period of time, I think it's going to be a huge uphill climb for him to make it in the NFL right now, unless he is a guy that's on practice squads and is doing this over a longer period of time into the future than what he would need to make the 53-man roster this season.
I want to correct myself because I even confused my Mark Murphys. And this is how it happens. So Mark Murphy of Clarence High School is the president of the Green Bay Packers right now. He never played for the Green Bay Packers. The other Mark Murphy only played for the Green Bay Packers. President Mark Murphy, Packers president Mark Murphy, played for Washington. The Mark Murphy I'm talking about played for only the Green Bay Packers. He's in the Packers Hall of Fame, and he was LeBron James's coach. I mentioned that he played for Washington earlier. I just wanted to make sure that I hammered all that out.
How about Dave Winfield, drafted into 3 different sports, right?
Yeah, Dave Logan also. Dave Logan, who was drafted in baseball, basketball, and he's from Denver. Was he out of a hockey background too? But anyway, yeah, former Browns receiver Dave Logan had a fine career. Now a Broncos, longtime Broncos broadcaster out there, probably known more for that than playing for the Cardiac Kids. But yeah, I think that it is the NFL, and again, you mentioned the sheer number of roster openings that you have in the NFL that you don't have in the NBA, but still way more examples of guys choosing football over basketball and having a go of it for decent success, and in some cases, Hall of Fame success. Jonah, what else do we want to get to before we are joined by Florina Altshiler? Anything else in the sports dustpan?
It's a bit of a slow time of the year with a lot of the local sports, and nationally, there's a lot going on. NBA finals coming up next week and the Stanley Cup finals coming up soon, as soon as the conference finals finish off. Locally, most of my attention's been on high school and college sports, with Niagara University baseball making the NCAA tournament for the first time in their history, setting their wins record with 38 wins this season. They never won more than 30 games in a season before.
How do you think they should feel about their appearance in the World Series in the regional? Of course, they don't win a game, losing to Oklahoma State and Nebraska, but fair representation on Saturday against Nebraska. It was they were never really in the game against the host Oklahoma State and the highest seed, but they didn't stand much of a chance. But I thought they acquitted themselves on Saturday against Nebraska. It's a shame they couldn't get a win.
Yeah, they hung tough with Nebraska. They opened up a 4-0 lead and had the lead into the 5th inning and ended up losing 7-5. And even against Oklahoma State, they got hits and they produced. They had more than 10 hits and they produced 7 runs. They gave up 11 runs in the first couple innings, 7 in the first inning, and that's where they lost the game very early on. And as Coach Rob McCoy said, they took a little while to get their sea legs, but after those first 3 innings of the first game, they didn't play quite even with these teams, but they played close enough. And I think MAC teams don't do very well at this point. I mean, I think Canisius maybe won a game in one of their NCAA regional trips a few years ago, but they don't really win enough and win the region. That's a pretty high bar to meet for all of these teams. It's like all of the sports now with the resources and NIL and also Northeast baseball. Even if the scholarships and everything was equal, the talent filters down south and into out west and into Texas, and it's not. They can be competitive, but it's a lot harder to be competitive for a Northeast team, even if you're in the Big East or a power team up this way. So I think, making the tournament is the goal. Winning the league and getting there is the goal for any team in the MAC. And if you can be competitive in these games, that's great. They are trying to win. Just winning one of those games would have been, a monumental achievement, I think, for a team like Niagara.
Yeah.
But for where they are as a program, winning the league for the first time and getting there was really a monumental achievement. I mean, Rob McCoy's been the coach there for 16 years. They had a losing record for the first 14 seasons. They had a winning record last year and obviously an even better winning record this season. But just to last that long at one program when you hadn't won the league and you weren't always winning, and then to get there in the end and have your best team, it's pretty kind of neat to see that story develop this season.
Do you think that this reflects any certain way on UB's decision to drop baseball? And I know we're talking about different conferences. It's easier to get to the College World Series, I'm sure, through the Metro Atlantic than it is through the Mid-American Conference. You have, some schools that, even though we were just talking about Kent State a little while ago, but there are some schools that are particularly, or I should say traditionally, tough, and it's better. And it's hard to compete in the Mid-American Conference in some sports. But UB dropping baseball a few years ago, saying that they wouldn't be able to compete because of Buffalo. But here we have teams that have competed, including St. Bonaventure relatively recently, getting to the College World Series. You mentioned Canisius. NCCC has a very competitive junior college program. I don't know. I don't think I blame UB, but it does seem like you can make it work if you do it right.
Yeah, it does throw that argument out the window, but the truth of the matter with that decision that UB made was they dropped the sports that weren't mandatory MAC sports. They wanted to shrink down the athletic department in any way that they could, and baseball not being a sport that they needed to sponsor in order to stay into the MAC, along with men's soccer and men's swimming and diving, that's where those decisions were made. And any kind of justification is really just rationalizing that decision. But yeah, if you take that at face value, if UB says we dropped the program because we can't compete, all 3 of these Big 4 teams, Niagara, Canisius, and St. Bonaventure doing it in the Atlantic 10, which is probably a better baseball league with some teams down there a little bit more south, goes to show that, that wouldn't have been the case for UB. And UB's had, they had a couple players that made it into the majors and they had some decent teams. They never won the MAC, but they were competitive in different years, and that could have been a good baseball program, I think, if they had stuck with it and put the resources into it and wanted to be a winning baseball program, but that just wasn't what that university decided to do a few years back.
And just out of curiosity, I want to take a look and see if I'm still right on Kent State. Yeah, Kent State. Champions in 2001, 2002, 2004, 2007, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2014, 2018. Then it's been a little spread out. Seems like Kent State has finally let some of these other teams compete, like Western Michigan and Ball State. But anyways, sometimes my Mid-American Conference history gets a little fuzzy because I grew up a Mid-American Conference fan. I paid attention to it, then got away from it totally. And now after moving to Buffalo, I'm back in Mid-American Conference territory. And sometimes I think it's my memory in general. I don't think it's my Mid-American Conference memory. I think it's just being 52. Let's take a break, and we'll be joined momentarily by Florina Altshiler to get into Gable Steveson, his past, and whether or not that's cause for concern here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.
This is Joe Lozito, and here are 3 real-life experiences I would rather experience again than tune into Tim Graham and Friends. Number 3, have double pneumonia and have 16 ounces of fluid drained from my lung. Number 2, drop a 25-pound weight on my foot and break 3 toes. And the number 1 miserable experience I'd rather go through again than tune into Tim Graham and Friends, getting stabbed 7 times on an Uptown 3 subway train in New York City. What are you people thinking?
Joined now on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, by Florina Altshiler. And she is, by demand, I should say, Florina. I had a few people reach out to me and say that they needed to hear from Florina so they could make heads or tails about the Bills' decision to sign Gable Steveson, former wrestling champion who has not played a down of football. He's going to play defensive tackle for the Bills, or at least they're going to try to teach him the position. And back in 2019, he was arrested for criminal sexual conduct in the state of Minnesota, which is where he was performing for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. He and a wrestling teammate were arrested, but the charges were dropped because of inadequate evidence. Also, though, and again, I'm loading it up here so you can take it whichever direction you want, Florina, because you're the boss in this situation. I don't know which way to take it, but the state of Minnesota, when they announced, or I should say Hennepin County, whatever, the district attorney, announced while dropping these charges, lamenting that they couldn't proceed because of a loophole in Minnesota law pertaining to an intoxicated accuser or a potential victim. And that loophole has since been closed. So perhaps Gable Steveson in 2024, if the same thing were to have happened, would have gone to trial or faced some sterner consequences. Florina, what can you tell us about this? And there are a lot of Bills fans out there that I think are maybe confused and want to know, should we root for this guy? So, and again, I don't want to put you in that position, but can we at least explain what happened and why it happened?
Laws,
from a legal standpoint.
Laws create criminals. So the law defines what a criminal is. At the time, with the way the law was written, his conduct was not criminal. Therefore, he's not a criminal. He didn't do anything illegal. The district attorney's office made a determination not to prosecute him. Being arrested does not mean that you're guilty. Being arrested does not mean that you committed the offense. There's plenty of people who are arrested and even prosecuted and eventually go to trial and are found not guilty. The nice thing about America is everybody is afforded due process. And through due process, some people are acquitted or found not guilty. Through due process, some people are not even prosecuted because law enforcement makes an arrest. The district attorney's office looks at the facts, looks at the evidence, looks at the law, and says there's not enough here. And they decline to prosecute the case. An accusation does not a criminal make. If that was the case, then basically anybody who's ever been accused of anything would be labeled a criminal, would be labeled a sexual deviant, couldn't get a job, couldn't get a contract, and basically should just be ousted from society and put on some island of criminals, right? So I think that from what we know in this case, without the benefit of having all of the evidence, but if we trust that the district attorney's office reviewed the evidence and reviewed it properly and made a sound decision not to prosecute, then what we know is that there wasn't enough to go forward. And therefore, he really can't be labeled somebody who's a rapist or someone who committed sexual assault or any of that.
We mentioned, Florina, someone who's been arrested. That doesn't mean that they are guilty, let alone if they're arrested and prosecuted. Hell, sometimes we see people who are found guilty that aren't guilty. So, but from a legal sense, we're talking also about Von Miller, who has been arrested, is still facing possible prosecution in Texas for allegedly assaulting his pregnant girlfriend. The Bills have stuck with Von Miller. And I think that maybe, I don't know, are there comparisons to be made there regarding, let me backtrack. And maybe it's just me asking you to reiterate what you've already said, but the idea that you've been arrested but you've been arrested after at least a police investigation. How do we square that circle? That I think a lot of people would get to the point and say he's been arrested for this and an arrest is bad.
Yeah, an arrest.
But it's also only part of the process.
I agree, right? An arrest is bad. There's nothing good about being arrested, but an arrest is not a criminal make in and of itself. In order for the police to make an arrest, it's a very low bar. All they need is probable cause. They don't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is what a prosecutor needs to take a case to trial. So long as they have probable cause, meaning somebody said something, I said, you, Tim, stole my wallet. That is enough for the police to now arrest you. Turns out an hour later, my wallet's actually in my pocket. Whoops. Well, now you're not going to be prosecuted, but you've been arrested because I made an accusation. People make mistakes. People lie. People misunderstand. People forget. Intoxicated individuals especially don't always recite what happened in an accurate way. And so when somebody makes an accusation, that could be enough probable cause to make an arrest. However, that very well may not be enough proof beyond a reasonable doubt to go forward with a case. That's where other corroborating evidence is needed. Sometimes a DNA kit. Sometimes ballistics evidence, physical evidence, a gun that's recovered, cell phone records, what other witnesses will report. Is it consistent or inconsistent what that one person is saying? Surveillance video. Maybe if this started at a bar, what does the bartender say? What do bar patrons say? Is there video cameras from the bar, right? So there's always a lot of other outside evidence that either supports what the accusation is, and then there may be enough for the case to go forward, or that other outside evidence actually disputes what that accusation is, there may still be enough to go forward, or it may just not be enough, and the district attorney's office needs to dismiss the case. There's also instances, cases that I've tried, where the district attorney's office says, you know what, there might be some inconsistencies, but we believe we can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, and the case goes to trial. And it's up to a jury of your peers to make the decision of whether or not you're guilty, whether or not you committed that crime. And sometimes a jury decides, no, it's not enough, and they find the person not guilty. What's most concerning is this rush to judgment simply because an arrest is made. We cannot, should not, must not, based on due process, based on the system that we have in our society, based on the democracy that we live in, we cannot immediately say, well, this person was arrested, so obviously they did it. That is wrong.
What are your thoughts on the Bills' decision to sign Gable Steveson not too long after they released eyebrow-raiser for a civil suit allegation, as heinous as it was? Charges, of course, never went through. The accuser amended her lawsuit, arises out of it. He is now a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. He'll be holding for Harrison Butker, by the way, on field goals. But the dichotomy of the Bills making a decision, and of course, right before the season, there's a lot of mitigating circumstances. He was a rookie. You all of a sudden had people on the roster. We're going to wonder if we should have this guy in our locker room or not, all kinds of things like that. But it was a civil suit allegation versus Von Miller or Gable Steveson, who have been actually arrested for arrested for, in the case of Gable Steveson, criminal sexual conduct, and with Von Miller arrested for assault.
So different lenses of analysis, to make it simple, I guess. With eyebrow-raiser, his contract at the time clearly said that if there was an active lawsuit or litigation, then he could be released. Whether it's a criminal lawsuit or a civil lawsuit, whether he's found guilty or not, the fact that a lawsuit was filed per his contract would be too distracting and he could be released. So what the Bills did in that circumstance was right, because they followed what the contract said, which is if he's being sued, he should be released. Now, at the end of the day, we know that what they did was wrong, not legally wrong, but pragmatically wrong, because all of the charges were dropped and he was cleared, and now another team signed him, right? So it was really unfortunate that they released him. It was really unfortunate that his career was on pause for over a year, but technically, legally, they were in the right and they were correct. Also, they created this image of, we stand up for victims of sexual assault, and we're taking this moral stance that we don't support any player who's accused of this. Forget convicted, but accused. That's fine, but now it sounds very Hippocratic that they're okay with Steveson. The difference with him is there's no lawsuit pending. There's no open case. There's no active litigation. This is an allegation that was made before the Bills signed him. And this is an allegation that was closed before the Bills signed him. So technically, legally, there's nothing about what happened in the past that allows the Bills to either sign and release him or not sign him. There really shouldn't be anything preventing them. However, from a moral standpoint, from a PR standpoint, from a what do we want to look like as a team perspective, right? It just doesn't look good. It stinks. What are they doing? They can't find a player who doesn't have a history of sex assault allegations? Come on.
Well, in that light, I mean, since this allegation came out, Gable Steveson's been able to continue wrestling for Minnesota and wrestle for Team USA, and had a period of time where he was training to be a professional wrestler and signed a kind of a lucrative contract in that way. I mean, how much responsibility do the Bills have 5 years later to be more, not legal responsibility, but in the public eye, responsibility to be more diligent than all of these other entities?
Well, look, just because these other entities don't care, doesn't mean the Bills shouldn't care. The Bills have their image to care about, and USA Wrestling has their image to care about. It's almost like saying USA Gymnastics didn't care that they had a physician sexually molesting all the gymnasts. Maybe now USA Swimming should pick up that physician because USA Gymnastics didn't care, right? I don't think that's a fair comparison. I think what USA Wrestling did was wrong. And I think what the Bills are doing is wrong from a moral perspective. Legally, there's absolutely nothing wrong with what they're doing. And he's not somebody who's been convicted. He's simply been accused, right? But there's a difference between being accused and being legally responsible, being criminally responsible, versus is this the type of person that you want to hire? Is this the type of person that you want to represent your team? Is this the face of the Bills? Is this someone we want, you know, playing football and being a part of the NFL? And I guess that's a question that football goers and teammates can answer.
The Hennepin County District Attorney, at the time, he announced that charges would not be filed against Gable Steveson and his Minnesota teammate. At that time, bemoaned that Minnesota law wasn't stringent enough, and even mentioned that in Wisconsin, it would be different. Are you familiar at all with this loophole that Minnesota has since closed up that would pertain to this?
So at the time in Minnesota, voluntary intoxication, meaning going out and getting drunk, was a defense to sexual assault. So if the complainant or victim voluntarily went out and got trashed, and then sex or some sort of sexual interaction occurred, that would prevent the complainant from going forward with charges because that complainant voluntarily got trashed. 2 years later in Minnesota, there was legislation passed that closed off that loophole, and voluntary intoxication is not a defense. Most states don't have this defense. Most states don't care whether you were roofied or you voluntarily drank to the point where you could not consent. So if you voluntarily drank but got so trashed that you're unconscious or not capable of consent, then the person could be prosecuted for having sex with you if you're not capable of consent.
And I'm not saying that's what happened in Steveson's case, but just hypothetically, that you would be out of luck if a rape transpired while you were drunk.
Well, under Minnesota law at the time, it would not be rape if you were drunk. So it just would not qualify.
Or sexual misconduct or sexual assault or all these other things. Like,
right.
If you were drunk, then that's your fault.
Under Minnesota law at the time, if you were drunk, that would be a defense to sex assault allegations if you voluntarily ingested that.
Meaning, okay, so you could bring it up as a defense in the trial. It doesn't necessarily clear you. The jury would just be allowed to, or does that clear you?
It would prevent you from being prosecuted.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, so you don't go to trial. Got it.
Similar to self-defense, right? Sometimes self-defense is something that's brought up at trial. You're prosecuted anyway. Other times it's so obvious that the self-defense applies that you're not even charged or arrested. Other times you're arrested, but you're not prosecuted because the DA, in looking at the case, says, come on, this is self-defense. We're not charging this person with murder. So it could apply at any stage, really. Here we know that the district attorney's office looked at the evidence and determined that there was not sufficient evidence to charge Steveson. What we don't know is whether there wasn't enough evidence simply because she got drunk on her own and that defense applied, or because it didn't even happen and it was a false allegation, right? Any of that could be true. We don't know. We haven't looked at the evidence. What we know is the statement that the district attorney's office made, which is that there was not sufficient evidence. And what we also know is that at the time, this defense was a valid defense of voluntary intoxication by the complainant.
Right. Yeah. I don't want people to think I'm applying that to Steveson, because I don't know the details of the case regarding that, as you just laid out, but we're talking about it here. And I just find it fascinating how it could differ from state to state. And again, this is my layman explanation or my layman's interpretation of it, but it seems to me quite unfortunate that voluntary intoxication is almost like blanket absolution at the time. And I'm asking that since with your background as the former sex crimes prosecutor for the state of Alaska and now as a defense attorney, you're just, who could better explain that to me, but it seems rather in the year, well, whatever that was, in the year 2019, that would be the case.
I will say that even with the laws as they are currently in most states where it is not a defense, sex crimes with a heavily intoxicated victim are very difficult to prove. First, you have to prove that intercourse occurred, which DNA usually goes a long way, or sometimes the defendant makes an admission that it happened. But secondly, you have to prove lack of consent. And that part is difficult because with intoxicated individuals, they simply don't remember. But it doesn't mean that they were unconscious. It doesn't mean that they were incoherent. And so sometimes people go out, they drink, they socialize, they meet, and it appears that they're capable of consent. They're having a conversation. They willingly go home with somebody. They are consenting to what happens. And then the next day wake up and are like, whoa, what happened? I did not agree to you. And it becomes this gray area of did they or did they not consent at the time? Were they or were they not capable of consenting at the time? You know, it's pretty clear if the person's unconscious. There's no gray area there. But go ahead and prove that they were unconscious. It's not like there's other people witnessing this. Sex crimes often occur with no other witnesses. Sometimes it's easier to prove because you could see the person completely stumbling out of the bar, or there's friends or other patrons who see the condition that this person is in and could say there's no way this person could have consented. But other times they're just drunk, but not drunk to the point where they could not have consented, or at least don't appear that way to the person who's later accused of raping them. So sex crimes, especially sex crimes by intoxication, are difficult. They're difficult to prosecute. They're difficult to defend. They're difficult to really unravel. It's not even a he said, she said situation. It's a she said, she doesn't remember situation oftentimes.
And these were a lot of the things that we discussed when we were analyzing Matt Ariza's case. And you explained the difficulty in the district attorney to be able to file charges because there also was alcohol involved on both sides, on all sides, I should say, because it was a house party and all the different accusations that were made. And it was going to be very difficult for anyone in that case to piece together what exactly transpired. Jonah, anything from you?
I have a question kind of for you, but Florina can react as well. How much do you think the Bills were aware of this? And did their background check go back that far with someone they're signing at this point in time? And not that this is a fair comparison, but it just one of the things that struck me is that Matt Hack was the player cut for this roster spot, and he was cut,
Mad
from
Hack's been
eyebrow-raiser.
caught. He's been cut twice for somebody who was accused of sexual misconduct or sexual assault. You're right.
It just seems from an optics perspective a little surprising that the Bills would kind of dig up a similar story again, and it makes me wonder if they knew about this and if it sort of maybe caught them by surprise that there was this kind of thing in the background.
I would be stunned if this surprised them, because it's one of the first things that comes up when you Google it. Now, he's a gold medalist. He's a world champion. And one of the first things that comes up is this. I mean, you don't even have to say Gable Steveson sexual assault. I think you just Google Gable Steveson. And of course, things are popping up because people are writing about it now. So there are fresh headlines regarding the Bills' hypocrisy on this. All you have to do is own an internet search engine or have access to it to see that this had happened. I think it would be malpractice. Somebody's going to get fired if the Bills didn't know about this. I mean, it's been out there. I will say this. So believe it or not, I do have wrestling sources. And there are some people who have said that one of the reasons he was let go from the WWE is because of a poor work ethic. He just didn't have it. He just didn't have what it took. He didn't necessarily put his heart into it. All kinds of things that would be sins in the athletic world. I mean, when I'm talking about legal sins, but somebody with a poor work ethic who maybe, half-asses it, is probably, Doug Whaley would say those are one of the greater sins. Remember, he was asked a few years ago, what is the one thing that would keep somebody off your team or take him off your draft board? And he said, stealing from a teammate. I mean, not anything. Oh, really? Not, a felony, no, stealing from a teammate, or, vehicular homicide's fine, but, don't steal from your teammate. Anyways, now I'm rambling, but, these sources say that he is an amazing person, that this is all, I mean, that nobody has a bad thing to say about him unless it's out of jealousy. Like some people bring some things up. Now, I don't know anything about the accuser in this. I doubt that the accuser, well, I don't know. I don't want to say. But as far as the wrestler, I'm told that he is all the things that it takes to be an Olympic gold medalist, he brings to the table, which is hard work and dedication and commitment and teamwork and all those things. But I mean, so if I'm Sean McDermott said he's been smitten by Chase Claypool, who's been run out of pretty much every organization he's ever been with. But Sean McDermott thinks Chase Claypool's great. I could imagine that Gable Steveson might be able to show him a couple of moves that Sean would like in the ring and say, oh my God, this guy's awesome because he won a gold medal.
Yeah, I would say it's basic due diligence to find out this information. There's really, if they did not know, then somebody somewhere screwed up. They should have known. I suspect that they did know, but made a conscious choice that they don't care. And that speaks to where they are as an organization from a moral turpitude standpoint, not from a legal standpoint. I don't think they're doing anything wrong legally. And I think that he's entitled to due process, and he was never convicted. But knowing that he's been accused of this, knowing that a police report was filed, knowing that he was arrested, I think raises some red flags and would give an employer concerns. And for something like the Bills, they've got many, many options. And I'm sure Jonah and Tim, you could speak to all the options they have of players who are well qualified. So to pick someone with this red flag, I find questionable.
Yeah, his agent did say that another team or two was sniffing around, but yeah, I mean, the guy's never worn football pads in his life. It does seem almost like it's a vanity signing, because of Sean McDermott's background with wrestling, and Terry Pagula is a big wrestling guy too, and the Penn State program, and obviously Gable Stevenson's not Penn State, he's Minnesota, but familiarity in the Big Ten, and whatever. It does kind of smack as a smack of a vanity signing to me a little bit, but maybe he works out. There have been players that have done it. Wrestling is one of those sports that does have skills that translate. Stephen Neal, the right guard of the New England Patriots, won 3 Super Bowls for them as their starting right guard. Carlton Hasselrig with the Pittsburgh Steelers in his 3rd season after a collegiate wrestling career, his 3rd NFL season, he was a Pro Bowler on the offensive line. So it happens. Florina, thanks for this. Anything you want to add that we didn't ask you about?
I think we've covered it. Thanks for having me again.
Well, thank you, Florina, for joining us, especially on a Sunday. I know you're busy and you got a lot of cases that you're working on, so to fit us in means a lot to us.